The blood is boiling at the Contrarians after the leak. So we'll get the budget tonight, but we've had a lot of leaks, and this is what governments...
You said to me when we were chatting on chat appropriately, you said to me, I was like, I'm not sure we're going to be able to talk about this. And you're like, no, there'll be enough leaked out that we can talk about it. And you were right. Like, there is enough leaked out. Clearly what they're doing is just trying to ease the country into... Because it's all broken promises, this tax. I think, because it would be easy for us to rant about this for the next 7 hours, I think we should have a bit of structure and explain to people first, like what some of these things are and why they exist.
Why don't I give the background first, and we'll go into the the CGT nuances. But so in a move that's really shocked Australia's fledgling startup community, the federal government has been backgrounding journalists on removing the capital gains tax discount. We'll talk about that more in a minute. On all assets and replacing it with an inflation-adjusted scheme. And this is what existed prior to the Howard government's changes in 1999. The original speculation back in February was that the government was thinking about winding back the 50% capital gains deduction for only property investors as part of its focus on tackling intergenerational inequality in housing by dealing with supply. And we actually have been very hot on this. So this is sort of an issue that we think needs to be sorted. And I think there was a lot of sympathy in the market for winding it back for property. Although there's possibly some issues there, but there's a lot more sympathy for property investors who've had a pretty good run. But Australian founders... startup founders and investors were absolutely blindsided by the government's release literally over the weekend amid rising anger that the move will spark and almost certainly lead to an exodus of tech talent from Australia. Lee Jasper, who's one of Australia's most successful founders and a fantastic guy, he sold his construction software company Aconex to Oracle for $1.6 billion, said the change would be a disaster for venture-backed companies. And of course, Lee won't be impacted by this himself. He's sold out already. So he can be very credible in saying this.
Well, he's got a new startup that he's doing.
Yeah.
And his cost base for his equity is zero.
Yeah, but it's minor. He's already got his exit. So it's not as if
Yes, you're right. Yeah, so we'll get to... We just highlighted two problems in one with this that we'll get to.
Yeah.
Yep.
So currently a high-income earner who receives the 50% CGT discount is effectively taxed at 23.5% on capital. Under the mood of change, the CGT discount will be scrapped and indexed to inflation. We'll talk about that in a second. Of course, this move will absolutely devastate founders and startup employees because they have no cost base attached to the shares. It's different if I buy BHP shares. Now I've got a cost base. If I buy a house, I've got a cost base. Founders don't have a cost base. So I expect they just didn't think about it because they're so stupid. But of course, the beneficiaries of Dim Jim's policies are, of course, wealthy boomers who have owned assets for decades and will be able to claim the full 50% discount based on historical inflation. So they claim that we're going to sort intergenerational inequality, actually making it worse because they are literally that stupid. Etchery founder Craig Blair noted that it's no good having more capital if you don't have the talented founders starting these companies in the first place. To make it less attractive and join a business at a time when there's already a structural pullback to the Silicon Valley is calamitous. Of course, friend of the pod, Steve Baxter, said the CGT changes would cause founders to flee to lower tax jurisdictions. At the same time, the government's talking about increasing the R&D deduction above a $150 million threshold, which I guess will benefit billionaires like Atlassian and Canva. So these guys, they're literally fumbling through life without a clue. So let's go back and talk about CGT and how this discount works.
I just want to give a one-word summary of these people that, like Jim Chalmers and the government, idiots.
I would have said a much harsher.
It's pretty weird that I speak like that, right? But like, it's not, because there are things that they're changing that will negatively affect me and you, but that we think are right for society.
Yeah. Tax housing as well. I'll get smashed with housing tax, but I don't care.
So this, or some trust changes they're making, which probably are not very fair.
Yeah.
I don't like the changes because like it will make me a bit poorer.
Yeah.
But I think they're fair.
Yeah.
They're fair changes. And so the reason I wanted to say that at the front end is I don't want people to feel like we're just going on a rant because we personally are going to suffer
two rich guys
downside.
going on a rant, which is nothing further from the truth. We're in favour of being taxed in certain ways, but not in moronic ways.
So if I'm thinking about a tax system, this is how I think about it, just a few headline points. So we need to, as a country, we need to make sure that we find a way of encouraging people to get the money they have, we'll call it capital, and put it into assets that are productive. Create jobs, ideally create exports. That's where we want capital to go. And where we don't want capital to go is in passive assets that just tie up money. And they may make money for the owner, but they don't benefit the country when the owner makes that money. That's not good. So that's objective number one. Maybe a second objective you could say would be we want to encourage people to start businesses that
employ people
and create exports or at least some kind of productive output.
Improve productivity.
That's important. And then the third thing we want younger people to have an opportunity to, one, own housing, but two, in general, more broadly, have wealth creation opportunities that older people had. That's very important.
Yeah.
They call this, what do they call this? Intergenerational equity or something like that. They don't really understand what that word means, but they're right with that term. We do want intergenerational equity means young people get the same opportunity for wealth creation that older people have had. So that is important. And the last thing we want is not to spend more money than we're actually generating and endlessly increase the debt that we have. Because ultimately the interest on that debt is going to mean that the services that Australians get...
We talked about Victoria before.
We're going to get worse services because we have to use the money to pay
So
debt.
we'll talk about taxes, but we need to talk about spending as well because the two are inextricably linked.
And so one of the challenges, and so this is the only other overarching thing I want to say. So there's a hierarchy of risk amongst, I'm going to just give an example of 3 investments. And so there's a pretty basic concept in market economics, which is the return needs to match the risk. Higher risk, higher return. And one way that you can determine returns is with the tax system. That determines outcomes. So the lowest risk thing that you can buy in Australia, notwithstanding the risk of collapse, but the lowest risk thing where you're unlikely to lose all your money and you get to use the asset while you've got it is your own house. That's a very low risk thing to own. And so that's the lowest risk. The next lowest risk...
It gives you a terrible return, but it has the best tax treatment because there's zero tax on it.
Well, what we can say is on a risk basis, the chances of you losing 100% of your equity in your house is very low compared to some other assets.
More that like you're getting if you look at the imputed yield,
before we
shocking.
get to the tax treatment, just as an asset.
Forget tax, but like I can rent a house much more cheaper than I can buy a house.
Yes, that's right. But I get
a super tax effective, no tax on the upside.
And the thing about a residential house is eventually it will get cheap enough that someone has to buy it from you because people need somewhere to live. Like I can have a warehouse.
No, but you can wipe out your equity if you've leveraged.
You can if you leverage too hard, but it's a low risk asset compared to the other end of the spectrum.
It's a low risk, low return asset.
Yeah, which is let's say a company.
Yeah.
So a company, you can lose 100% of your equity. The company can go broke, especially an early stage company that you're just starting.
Yeah.
That's the riskiest asset class that you can invest in. And somewhere in the middle might be investment property. And so what you'd want is you'd want a tax structure if you were trying to align risk and return where starting your own company gave you the most favourable tax treatment all the way up to your own house. You don't need great tax treatment for your own house because it's a pretty low risk asset.
Yeah.
This country exactly flips the risk treatment of the taxation system to make the most attractive asset your own house, the second most attractive asset an investment property, and the least attractive asset starting your own business.
Or investing in somebody's own business.
Or investing in someone else's business. But actually investing in someone else's business is still now going to be better tax treatment than starting the business itself.
Well, it depends when you invest, but yes.
And so that is what I mean, or what we mean when we say you want to encourage people to put their money in the right places. Totally. And this is the absolute final thing I want to say before we talk about the changes. So negative gearing is a very weird thing.
So if we flip from CGT to negative gearing,
so I'm going to talk about we talked about CGT, but now I want to talk about negative gearing because the two are very tightly linked.
Before we go to negative gearing, because I want to talk about negative gearing as well. But so the way capital gains tax works in Australia, at the moment, it's potentially about to change tonight.
Well, you should say, what does capital gains tax mean?
Yeah. So basically, when you or I get paid for our jobs, our regular jobs, we get paid income, and you pay income tax, and that's a scale, and it basically there's tax brackets, and you pay at above a certain level 47%.
And it's called a progressive tax system because the more you earn, it gets progressively higher tax rates. So not only do you pay more tax for earning more, but you pay a higher percentage of your income.
Above a certain level, which I'm not sure what the highest tax bracket is now, call it 300K or whatever it is, and above that you're paying that higher level.
Yeah, I think it might be 360.
Yeah, so what happens with income is pretty straightforward. What the government and what governments around the world say with capital is we're not going to tax capital like we tax income.
You say income is straightforward, but the only other bit you should add with income is it's not that you get taxed on 100% of the income you bring in. You can make certain deductions. So if you make $200,000, but there are various things that you can legally claim as deductions. Maybe that's $20,000 worth of stuff. Then you'll get taxed as if you earned $280,000, not $300,000. That's going to be relevant in the negative gearing discussion.
The way capital gains tax works around the world is governments simply say, you've probably been taxed initially. So when you've earned income, you've saved that money, you then invested it, you're basically getting taxed a second time. So government said, we want to encourage people to invest in, rather than put the money under the bed or invest in really low risk stuff or simply buy a house, we want people to invest in other people's businesses.
Productive assets.
Yeah, productive assets. So we're going to give a discount on productive asset investments. And if you look, I looked at basically OECD countries, and the highest country I could find on capital gains tax, what do you reckon the highest taxing capital gains tax country was?
What country was it?
Yeah.
In the OECD, I'm not sure, but I doubt it's more than 30%.
Well, it was Denmark because they're basically socialist. They were at 42.
They're at 42 on.
But this is Denmark. So this is like, these are the basically communist countries in Scandinavia. And you got Chile at 40, Norway, another communist country at 37.8, Netherlands at 36. These are all, Finland at 34. Then you got France, which is basically socialist. They're now at 34. Ireland 33, Sweden, which is socialist, down at 30, UK's at 28, Austria's at 27.5, Australia's at 23, US is at 23.8, basically the same as Australia. And then there are heaps of countries at 15%, like Hungary, Poland, Greece, Colombia. Then you've got a bunch of countries at zero, like Dubai and Singapore.
Well, there are two countries at zero that are very close to Australia.
New Zealand,
One
zero.
is New Zealand, which is basically culturally the same as Australia. And their income tax is a bit lower than Australia, but not much. We should say in New Zealand, the Labor government has said they're going to add a capital gains tax. And Singapore, that has a maximum tax rate of 22% on a hell of a lot of income and has zero capital gains tax and is very encouraging for founders to move there to set up their businesses.
Totally.
So it's not like we're in a part of the world where you'd have to sacrifice everything to stop being a tax resident. There are two very good countries nearby that have zero capital gains tax.
Yeah. And so it's Australia, if this mood of change goes through, will have the highest capital gains tax in the world. Like not even like the Scandinavian countries' tax is high. Like Sweden's at 30%. This is just like the most outrageous suggestion I think I've ever seen in my life, and just shows how out of touch this appalling government has become.
So we should talk about how are things taxed now and how will they change? And so you've talked about how they're taxed now. I like to use numerical examples. So if you go, I'm going to use an example of an investor and then a founder. So an investor invests $500,000 in something and they sell it 5 years later for $1 million. Let's assume that there were no other expenses. They've made a $500,000 gain. So you have to do something with that $500,000. Now, if you said you should just add that to their income, the problem with that is as follows. The first problem is what you've already said. They've already been taxed on the money they've invested. But the second problem is this. That income, that gain was really earned over 5 years. If there's someone that's earning $200,000 a year, they're not paying the top tax bracket. If they divided the gain over 5 years, it would be $100K a year, unindexed. That still wouldn't put them into the top tax bracket. But if you dump it all into 1 year, it goes straight up to the top tax bracket. Great point. So that's the first problem.
I've never even thought about that.
With dumping it all in 1 year. The other thing...
So at the very least, they should be averaging it over the...
Absolutely. And then what they say is, but we're going to have to make you pay capital gains tax on this, because I'm a fan of capital gains tax. I think if you want to have funds, I'm not a fan of government spending at these levels, but I do think if you want to have free hospitals and free education and other things, you do have to pay for it, and you can't only pay for it out of income and corporate tax. Actually, corporate tax should probably come down.
I'm not a fan of capital. I much prefer like a property or a wealth tax and a capital gains tax.
It could be. And so they're trying to use a capital gains tax as a proxy for a wealth tax, okay?
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's only came in 1987. Pre-19... If you're
zero.
Solly Lou and you own Premier Investments, when you sell that, you're going to pay zero capital gains tax.
Zero.
Yeah. So it's all grandfathered, they call it. And so... and we'll come back to that, because grandfathering is how the young are really going to get screwed in this budget.
We'll get to that. We'll get to negative gear in a second.
And so the thing is that they say, well, we're going to get you to pay tax on this, and we're going to make it part of your income, but it's not really fair if we just dump it in there. So we'll say that $500K, if you've held it for more than a year, which you have, we're going to cut that in half. So you're only going to have to say that you made a $250,000 gain, and you're going to put that into your income. That's the way the system works. When people say it's a 50% discount, that's what they mean. You only have to get half the gain and put it on your income.
This is still higher than a lot of countries. Like I'm in favour of maybe a sub 10%.
Well, how
capital gains
high
tax.
it is, the beauty of this system is as follows. The size of the discount kind of follows the amount of tax that you're paying. And so, like, you could argue, well, it's not progressive because if you're on a lower tax rate, then you're going to be paying less. It's less of a benefit, right? Because you're saving less tax. But the thing is, the people on a higher tax rate, they paid more tax going into it in the first place. It's kind of fair, right? And so if we look at the founder, though, this is the beauty of this system. A founder gets their shares for zero. They just started the business. And now they sell them for $1 million. Well, hang on. They've made a $1 million gain, so they're going to have to pay more tax than the person that invested at $500,000. That's fair, but they get the same game. It's like you get the $1 million, you divide it in two. Okay, you made a $500,000 gain you need to put on your tax, and now we put that on your tax. It works whether you're the founder or the investor. It works the same way.
It does, but I think it's still a bit harsh on founders in a sense that, to your point on the not averaging, is more impactful for founders. So I actually think this is the existing system is harsh on founders.
It is, but what you can say is at least the system
it's better than what's being
gives
proposed.
founders a very big discount relative to if it was just income. Which I'm agreeing with you. It's not. But as you say, it should have gotten better, not worse.
But the founders could have been getting 30% income and paying himself $200,000 a year.
That's right.
So like, it's the current system is, I'd say, semi-bad for founders, and the mooted system is a catastrophe for founders.
So that's what happens today.
As
of now, and so you can do that for any asset class. And the beauty of this system is as follows: if an investor put $500,000 in, and then the company was running out of money, and they put another $250,000 in. Now their cost base is $750,000. When they sell it for $1 million, the gain is $250. You divide it in half. Now they claim $125. Like, the system works really well. It works for shares. It works for property. Like, it actually, there's some inelegance in the system, but not much. Like, it's a pretty good system.
I don't love it for I gotta say, like, if they simply got rid of it for property, I wouldn't have an issue. It's the getting rid of it because property, as to your point, it's a non-productive asset. So that's where I have the. But
so
and that was what they mooted originally, is only property.
So before we go and talk about what they're doing to founders with CGT and young people, I just want to touch on property for a second by saying this: the number one challenge with property is that the house that you own and live in, you will never pay any capital gains tax when you sell that house. That means the now 90-year-old grandmother who just passed away, she bought her house for $25,000. It just sold for $5 million as an estate sale. There's no tax on that. And her two kids get $2.5 million each, presumably, from that, tax-free. There is no cap. There is no limit. So number one, that's
ridiculous. Which we've talked about repeatedly.
But it's very unpopular vote-wise to bring in a tax on a primary residence. The next issue,
and I think, like, if you are going to tax, I would probably do something like call it a sub 20% tax rate and indexed. So it's still it's a much more gentle form of how you, and admittedly this would always, I think taxes always go up, not down, but I think you've got to tax the primary residence somehow, but you've got to be, obviously it's hard because then you're going to completely crater the property market
you can
really
have
quickly.
A ceiling, or there's 100 ways to solve. I generally prefer simplicity to complexity, but your point is there's 100 ways to solve that problem if you wanted to solve it.
Remember, but they love old rich people, these governments. They pretend they don't, but they do. They love them.
Well, I think these,
and they all own properties. Like Jim Chalmers owns a property, investment property.
Well, we'll get to that. But part of this, I think, is class warfare. But part of it, I think, is just straight incompetence and stupidity. That's my honest view.
I think it's both.
Of what's going on.
They intermingle beautifully with this government.
Remember I said, if you had a business and then you were losing money on that business and you had to put more money in that business, or the business just lost money that year. Let's say a business just loses $100,000. You own a private business. You're not a sole trader, because a sole trader is different, but you own your own business and you lose $100,000. What happens to that $100,000 loss? Maybe you paid yourself an income of $300,000 and you lost $100,000. Well, that $100,000 stays in the business and it can be offset against future profits. That is what happens to that. Actually, one of the things the government's doing is letting you say if you made profits in previous years, you can get a tax refund on some of the tax you paid if you're a small business. I like that. That's a good thing. So that's how it works if you lose money in a business.
Yeah.
But if you buy an investment property and you lose money, well, that is a whole different world. If you buy an investment property for $2 million and you charge, I don't know, like $50,000 of rent, but the property with the interest and the maintenance cost you $100,000, you just lost $50,000. Good news. We are going to let you make that $50,000. One of those expenses you can just take off your income on your income tax. Now, and that is the most that's called negative gearing.
Yeah.
And that is the most regressive piece of taxation you can have, because the richer you are and the higher the tax rate you pay, the more you save. Yeah. And that encourages people to buy investment properties and charge low rent. They can charge low rent because when they lose money on the investment property by not charging enough rent, they can claim it back as a tax
slightly
benefit.
Wrong. They don't charge, landlords will always charge the most rent they can. What happens? They overpay for the properties and cause the interest bill to go up higher.
But now that they've overpaid, the negative gearing lets them continue charging rent that doesn't cover the property.
But where you sort of got misspoke a bit, and everybody does, is landlords don't undercharge rent. Landlords and property managers are rational. They always charge the most rent they can. But what happens is the interest just is above that. They're not discounting.
No, I agree with you, but that is the system that you've just outlined is correct. They can overpay.
Yeah.
But if you suddenly changed the system, for example, because this is one of the things we're going to get to is that they're not changing negative gearing on existing properties.
Yeah.
If you suddenly change the system, all of a sudden they can't claim these losses. Either rent needs to go up or they need to sell the property, right?
Yeah.
And so the change they're making...
Well, they sit on the loss and don't claim it.
But but most people can't afford to do that, right?
And they've also lost the discount. The reason people did this negative... The reason why people overpay for investment properties is two reasons. They work together and Labor's
that's why I say
tackling them.
They're integrated problems.
Yeah, so basically what property investors done for the last 27 years is overpay for properties and lose money because the interest doesn't cover the rent, knowing that they can deduct against get 47% discount on the loss. So instead of losing 50 grand a year, you're losing 25 grand a year.
So if you're on the top tax bracket, the government subsidises 50% of your losses without taking any equity in your property.
Yeah. And when you sell it, you get the discount. So basically people are sort of overpaying initially, knowing that somebody will overpay when they sell it because of the discount. So what the government's done is obviously removing the 50% CDG discount, which we don't have a huge issue with there. They're also removing negative gearing unless it's an existing property or you already own the property. So if I was to buy an investment property in 6 months' time, I wouldn't be able to negatively gear it.
Unless it is a new build.
Unless it's a new build. Forget new builds.
So they've kept it on new builds. And so let's just say this in the simplest possible terms. So Mike does not own an investment property, I'm guessing, because you're not of the age that generally owns investment properties. And so Mike is younger, let's call it.
And Joel, do you own an investment property?
And Joel doesn't. Yeah. Joel's younger. Joel might not even own his own house, right?
Joel's in his early 20s.
Yeah, Joel's in his early 20s.
Yeah.
So you are meant to be the beneficiaries of generational equity. Well, I've got bad news for you. This government has just permanently screwed you.
Yeah.
Because all of the...
And the Greens helping, by the way. Greens vociferously going on with this. So if you're voting Greens or Labor, you're signing your own death warrant.
Yes, you're shafting yourself as a young person. So this is why I say this. All these politicians in Parliament, they're older. And they own investment properties.
In a case like 3, 4, 5, 6 investment properties.
Because I think something like 2.2 million Australians own an investment property. Mostly they own one. It's a bit more than one on average, okay? And so I think 20% of the total residential property stock is investor owned. And so all of these politicians sitting in Parliament with these existing properties, they get to keep their negative gearing because it's been grandfathered. That means you as the poor taxpayer, you are going to continue subsidising 50% of the losses that they make from owning their properties. But if you now try to buy an investment property, guess what? You can't get the benefit of the government subsidising any percentage of your expenses because negative gearing is going to be scrapped for people that are buying rental properties after the budget.
I will just say it's interesting because on last week's Q&A episode, I believe there was a question around sort of this world about how younger people are falling behind. And do you think this contributes more to that?
This will put you further behind because this is the situation. People that are boomers, they got the benefit of no CGT and low housing prices. We came along, Gen X, you think you're Gen Y, but let's say our kind of age,
Decennial.
and we got the benefit of negative gearing and a 50%.
Well, I've never actually negatively geared a house, so hence because of my
this
youth.
generation got the benefit,
Well,
right?
your generation did. And me and Mike's generation haven't had that.
Not
Well,
Joel's,
your
though.
poor
Like
cho-
Joel,
your
poor
poor-
little Gen Alpha over there.
your poor choices and Mike's generation. And so, but they got the benefit of negative gearing, government paying half effectively for higher income earners, half of the losses, and a 50% discount on capital gains tax. And so boomers and Gen X, they've had this chance to compound their wealth by using the tax system effectively. There is no faster way to make money than not having to pay tax on the profits that you've made and being able to compound those. Now you come along and guess what? We've got a special surprise for you. Because you're poorer and you haven't yet had a chance to compound wealth, because you haven't been alive long enough, we've got a special surprise for you as the government. We're going to take away all the compounding benefits from you. We're going to take away negative gearing, which we don't oppose, but that's a compounding benefit.
Take it away completely.
We're
Don't
going to
leave it for
take it away
established.
from
Yeah.
you, but not from older people
Not
that
from
already
us.
own properties.
Not from us who own 6 properties. We're going to keep it for ourselves. But you young people, you idiot Greens voters who voted for this are going to get absolutely shafted. Well done, Greens voters. You've shafted yourself.
And when boomers go and sell their business, they get to keep 100% of the profits they make from selling their business. But you're not even going to be allowed to discount it by 50%.
That's a great point. Why on earth won't they get rid of this pre-CGT? They can get rid of that as well if they wanted to.
Well, they're not. And so you
It's
are going
great.
to
That's
get
a
the
great point.
worst tax treatment. And I'll tell you the worst tax treatment of all for you. This is the great thing for you, Mike, running your own business. You're going to love this, okay? Basically, they're going to say, we're going to index. So what does indexing mean? It means you take what the inflation rate is and you just keep so you start at 1.0, and if the inflation rate is 3%, now it becomes 1.03, and if the inflation rate's 10% next year, it'll be bad, but like
What's
heading in that
possible.
direction,
Yeah.
then you multiply 1.03 by 1.1 and that puts another 10% on. And so you end up trying to say, what's the real value of the money when you finally sell? But think about this. So that person that bought their investment for $500,000, there's now going to be an indexation factor. They multiply that $500,000 and they say, well, the value of that $500,000 today is really $700,000. So our cost base increases to $700,000. We sold for $1 million. Okay, instead of saying we made $500,000 profit and dividing it in 2, which is the current system, we're going to say the cost base has gone up from 500K to 700K. So we've made $300,000 profit. Now we're going to take the whole 300,000 and put that on our tax. And so it's not that different, but this is the problem, Mike. How much did you pay for the equity in your business?
0.
So I'm now going to multiply that by infinity and as an indexation factor. And what is now the value of the equity that you paid?
What's your cost base?
What's your cost base now? 0 times infinity, it's still 0.
Yeah.
And so whatever you sell your business for in future, instead of getting a 50% discount on the capital gains tax, you will get a big fat 0% discount on the capital gains tax. And you will now have to pay, presuming you sell your business for an amount of money that takes your tax to your total income above $360,000, which is the highest tax bracket. Instead of paying 25% tax on the profit you make from selling your business, you will now pay 50% tax on that. And so what is the chances of you as a young person, being able to compound your wealth to get rich? No chance, because all of the benefits that previous generations have had are all being stripped from you in the name of intergenerational equity.
Even worse, the whole way indexation works is if I put $1 million into BHP, and I'm already wealthy, I'm a boomer who's put $1 million into BHP or whatever, I get to index that.
Of
I get the
course.
discount. So the older people get the discount. So every single thing they're doing, the so-called friend of the young Greens, who the Greens are spurring this, and idiot Chalmers and Katie Gallagher, who can barely, so dumb she can barely talk. Like these morons are completely ruining it for young people.
I would say you could not come up with an idea It'd be hard for me to think of a way to make the rich get richer and the poorer be worse off than
staggering.
these changes.
Yeah.
It is so catastrophic. And this is why we talk about the flight of founders overseas. So, Mike, you're now going to start your podcasting business. And I just say to you, and you don't own property in Australia. And so that means that you can leave Australia. And as long as you don't own and live in a property in Australia and don't spend more than 180 days a year here, you won't be a tax resident of Australia. Now, if we try to leave Australia as a tax resident, the government and the ATO does a bit of a nasty thing. And they say, we're just going to value your assets on the day you leave. And we're going to work out how much tax you owe us based on the value of your assets. But you have no value of your assets. You're young. You haven't accumulated assets. And by the way, with this government, you won't be accumulating assets.
You might be accumulating, you just have to pay it all back to them.
Yeah, and so you say, hang on. So I'm going to start this business and I'm hoping to sell this business. And let's say I'm hoping to sell it for some millions of dollars in a few years' time. And I don't really have to be in Australia more than 180 days a year. Maybe you do, but if I'm doing a software business or another business, I don't. And so I look around and I say, hang on a second. Why should I start this business in Australia? I don't want to be a tax resident in Australia. And I look at New Zealand and I say, New Zealand, that feels a lot like Australia. I'll pay a bit lower income tax. And also, they've currently got no capital gains tax. I'll pay no
Singapore,
tax.
very nice place to live.
What about Singapore? It's 7 hours away. It's closer to overseas markets that I might be targeting anyway. Brilliantly run, has a maximum tax rate of 22%. As a founder, you're not going to be paying anywhere near that because that's a high thing.
Yeah.
And it has 0% capital gains tax. And they'll give me incentives as a young person for starting a business in Singapore. And so when they go and work out the cost of this to the economy, they can't work out the cost of all of the founders that now go overseas to start their business.
That. What actually will happen as well, when you found it, you don't know how well your business is going to go when you found it, but you know within a year or two, you've got product market fit.
Yes, that's right.
So what everybody's going to do, and what the PwCs is what I'm going to tell you to do, is as soon as you start getting product market fit, they'll get a super valuation on the business, and you flip straight to Singapore or New Zealand. You maybe move there, maybe you don't. There's ways around this. Every great business is going to flee the country as soon as it looks like they're becoming great, and these morons are going to lose all this revenue.
So let me tell you 3 theses that I have on this about what you should do. And you tell me if you agree or disagree with these theses. Thesis 1, if you're a founder, at least with product market fit, if not starting a business, and you don't need to be in Australia for running this business, you absolutely should not be a tax resident in Australia growing your business. Agree? Go to Singapore.
I think certainly as soon as you hit product market fit, you flee.
Get out of here. Yeah. And so that has to happen because if it doesn't happen...
people are rational. Of course it'll happen.
And that has to happen. So we have to have a flight of productive enterprise out of Australia.
Just to be clear, we already have a very high CGT regime. We have one of the worst in the world already. And they're going to double. They're going to have the worst place for founders to start their business or to run their business is Australia. Thank you, Jim Chalmers. You've made Australia the hellhole of world startups.
So you have to say that businesses that are producing jobs, which is predominantly new businesses and growing businesses, you would have, unless there's a reason you have to stay in Australia for family or other things. Yeah. But if you're young and you're unencumbered, you've got to move overseas. Yeah,
founders are risk-seeking.
Get out of here. Get under this. Okay, that's number 1. Number 2, let's talk about the most logical place for protecting generational wealth under this regime. Invest, unless you think the property market is going to crash.
I think the property market is not going to like these changes, by the way.
Well,
it's going to be pretty bad for them.
But the best
I'm not going to send any tears over, but it's not going to be good for property.
Well, the best way, though, over the long term, over 30 years, that you could create a tax-effective generational transfer of wealth is to overcapitalise your primary residence.
Yes, but I think that changes now that investors are about to get smashed.
Well, maybe. So let's talk about what happens to investment property. But let's say if the property market didn't change, let's make that a constant. Yeah. Everyone should go and buy the most expensive house they can possibly afford because there will be no tax on that when you transfer that to whoever you sell it to.
Yeah, I think what the assets that benefit the most from these changes are existing companies that pay dividends, and so
we'll get to dividends. Absolutely.
So you get obviously you still get the dividend limitation, but you also get the indexation of cost base. So I can invest in Luxuryscapes now, Catapult now, established businesses people who invest in us are going to have a great run. You get the indexing gains, we're paying dividends, so you get the great dividend invitation. So business we're going to benefit from these likely personally, but everybody else is pretty much
let's take that as a thesis. Now I've got a few more. I've got 5. So let's take this as the next one. The thing that people are going to be doing is saying, what's an established business paying dividends? Because the treatment of dividends is really good in Australia. And so, I'll set my cost base. I'll still pay more capital gains tax probably than I otherwise would have.
Maybe not.
Not if I
not with inflation rates like these idiots are managing now. I think you're paying less or the same.
Well, but
I don't know, they cap it out at 50%.
To get to a
maybe
50% discount though.
Do they cap it at 50 or do they keep going?
Well, who knows? That's a good question.
Yeah.
They haven't
we'll find
said,
out tomorrow. Yeah.
But even if it grows at 4% a year, it's still going to take you 10 plus years.
I know, but if you hold an asset for 25 years, you can pay zero capital gains.
I agree with
potentially.
that. So people are going to flood into existing, maybe low growth businesses, paying high dividend yields that are being taxed in Australia, so they're fully franked. And so there will be a lot of pressure on companies to start paying dividends.
Totally.
I think in Australia, that's going to be a big push. So yes, that's another thesis. I think
investment property is going to absolutely hammer. So that means all property is going to get hammered.
Let's talk about what happens to investment property. So there's a pool of X number of investment properties today that are being held. It's 2.2 million, okay? That's the number. Now, if you own one of those investment properties, for as long as you own that property, and presumably if you pass it down through probate when you die, that is going to be entitled to negative gearing, correct?
Yeah.
And so you would not sell that property. And so if I sell an investment property and buy another investment property, I lose the negative gearing benefit. Yeah. So I think the 2.2 million people that own those properties, they will be holding on to those properties for dear life.
Yeah. And you don't get the discount anymore for CGT. So why would you...
all of those 2.2 million properties, they were going to come onto the market. They're not coming onto the market. Yeah. And if they come onto the market, then this is the other thing. To park that for a second, you got these 2.2 million tied up. Now, imagine I'm in the market to buy an investment property. I'm looking right today. I'm looking to buy a $3 million investment property and rent it out. As of tomorrow, I would be crazy to buy that investment property. Yeah. I'll get no negative gearing and I'll be penalised on CGT. So the whole economics don't work.
Demand
so you can say, well, the price will fall. And I think you're right, but I think this. A whole lot of people that were going to buy investment properties will not buy investment properties. And guess what happens to investment properties? That's the rental stock in the market. Yeah. And so I think the rental stock is going to be these 2.2 million that exist today. That rental stock will stay in the market.
Or do they buy new properties?
Well, they can't buy new properties because they get no negative gearing on the new properties.
No, you get negative gearing on new properties.
A new dwelling?
New builds.
Well, then we have a pink bats bubble. Remember pink bats? So you put great tax treatment on something, it instantly gets rorted. Yeah. And so...
what's going to happen is the price of new properties
That's right, it's going to go up. So just the price of new dwellings is going to rise because the economics will look so much better because of the tax treatment. Yeah. And so I think in the short term, there will actually be fewer rental properties available on the market. 100%. Because investors are not going to buy properties.
You get the full CGT discount if you buy the house yourself. So
that's right. So when it comes to an auction...
So if you can't afford a house, if you're a renter who can't afford a house, see you later, mate, because you're in all sorts of...
That's good night. So I want to
Green's again just the enemy of the renter.
When there is a house on the market, there's an investor looking at that property and an owner looking at that property. Let's say there's two owners and an investor. One hopeful owner rents today. They can't afford the property. Yeah. So they're at the mercy of the rental market. They drop out of the auction. Maybe the investor would have won that auction because of negative gearing, but the investor's price that they can pay now is much lower because no negative gearing. And so that's nice. It goes to a buyer, an owner-occupier. And so I think there will be some benefit for people who are on the margins, almost able to afford a property, but couldn't quite afford a property. Yeah. I think they'll be able to buy a property. But I think if you're deep in rental territory, this is a disaster for you. And, there is such a thing in markets called the supply and demand curve. I know this government doesn't like the idea of supply and demand curves, but if there's less supply of rental properties, then the price of rentals will go up to the upper limit that people can stretch to pay. And so I think that this is going to be a disaster for renters.
And can we just talk about the other side? I think I agree, but this whole debacle that we've spent 40 minutes talking about, this is only going to raise like $6 billion a year. So it's not even a significant revenue generator for the government because it's only a small number of businesses that create all these jobs and all this prosperity. And And I know I like to bang on about the NDIS. So I did a little bit of research in the NDIS.
Of course, this is because of the NDIS.
Well, it's because of all the shit they spend money on, the SRL, the NDIS. But look how much NDIS cost about $50 billion. So call it 8 times all this savings. So we're not even saving much from this.
Yeah.
If you look at the NDIS, so we talk about the NDIS, and I do about the thing about the NDIS. So NDIS, where it got the government got the social license to spend all this money, because pre-NDIS, pre-GILAB, it was all a bit of a hodgepodge of state government. There was charities, all this kind of stuff. So they kind of streamlined it, which kind of makes sense because it was a bit all over the place. So what the government basically said is, if you've got a disability, you're really unlucky. And I think we all kind of agree. Like someone's quadriplegic or really seriously MS.
And we believe in a safety net
Yeah.
as part of the nature of like the social fabric of our society.
Yeah. So someone's been and if someone's been quadriplegic, and we absolutely think they need to get protected by the government. And you've been really unlucky there. We're going to give you a bit of luck back to make up for all that. So I think that's understandable. I think the issue with the really seriously disabled is how much money they get. It's about $500,000 a year, up to $1 million a year.
Really?
Which is pretty extraordinary.
I'm shocked by that.
Yeah. Which is, so I think the average quadriplegic is around the sort of $300,000-$400,000 mark and up to $1 million. So
because presumably it's very expensive to take care of them.
I know, but that's like 6 care. It sounds like
I can't really comment on whether that.
Yeah.
I can say this: it's a lot of money.
Because it's being rorted and frauded. So what happens is you need a wheelchair. I'm going to charge you $80,000 for a wheelchair because the NDIS is paying. So there's a huge amount of rorting.
That's absolutely true, and definitely there is a big push. I've seen this push. Someone said to me, "It's one thing to know this is going on. It's another thing to meet the people that are rorting it."
Yeah.
And so I know some people that know the people that are rorting it, and so the thing is, there is a huge push to say it's use it or lose it money.
It's exactly what happens.
You've got to spend it.
You can't carry it forward.
Yeah.
So it was just a tip. So you've got. I think we all agree, if you're quadriplegic, if you've got MS, you need support.
I'm all in favour of taxpayer support.
So that should cost about $5 billion a year. I think it costs about 10 for the really genuinely disabled. So we're probably wasting about $5 billion there. That's $5 billion, bang, gone. But at least...
So I can't comment because I don't know, but I take your point.
At least those people are deserving of something.
Yeah.
Then you've got called the intellectual disability group, which is another group entirely, which is not autism. That's sort of a different level. So it's not quadriplegic, but you need
cerebral palsy and things like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you definitely need help.
Well, they need money, for
Absolutely.
sure.
And no one's sort of criticising that, but that's $13.5 billion.
13.5
billion a year. So that's... And this is money that wasn't being spent like a fraction of it was. Then you've got, of course, the autism. $10.2 billion.
And we could say this. We could say even if 70% of it's genuine, I'm going to say 70 because we'll get no hate mail and still be able to have this conversation. That's $3 billion a year that's rorted, not overspent.
Oh, you're talking autism or
autism?
Disability? Oh, forget autism's all rorted.
Well, it's not. I totally disagree with that.
But you need to distinguish between intellectual disability and autism. So go back to my first point: is when someone's been really unlucky, we need to support them. If someone's quadriplegic, we need to support them. If someone's got autism, which is learning disabilities, speech issues, why is the government funding this? We've got to draw the line, and it's there.
Well, let's say a couple of things here. Okay?
This is $10 billion a year.
All right, but let me tell you a couple of things. So there's maybe multiple arguments that you're conflating here. One argument is, should the government be paying for ASD, autism spectrum disorder? That's argument one. You can debate that independently of whatever you feel about the diagnostic criteria.
The average is $30,000 a year, by the way, for every autistic person.
Okay,
$30,000 a year.
That's a lot of money.
That's extraordinary.
The next question is, when people are, let's say, far down the autism spectrum, like, would I say they fall into the, I don't like to say unlucky because I kind of feel like it's condescending, but in your bag of unluckiness, they need help. I absolutely would put them in that category. And then the next question is, where does that line end? And how many people really shouldn't need to get any kind of help from the government, even if we think that help is available.
Plus, it's not mean tested. So it means tested. So you
correct.
Well, millionaire
that's why I'm saying I don't think we need to say. I think it's wrong to cast aspersions on people that are significantly down the autism spectrum.
I'm not casting aspersions on those people. I'm casting aspersions on the government for giving the money. It's not the autism.
So I think those people. So I personally would be in favour of some money going to those people because I think you're underestimating what that looks like. And maybe I said it's very
a couple of $1,000 a year, $5,000. Well, how much should it be?
Yeah,
like not $30,000. That's some people earn that much working full time.
So that's why I say they're separate issues, right? Like I'm saying this in kind of. I'm not really trying not to attack you or be critical here. What I'm saying is, because we've had slightly different life experiences in where we've come from, like I think I've got more visibility around what autism spectrum disorder looks like from a medical point of view, and I think I'm much more sympathetic to those people being deserving is again the wrong word. I support our society helping families like that. Is it 30K?
Nothing's free. So if we're going to give money, if we're going to give money to someone who's a kid with autism, we're taking money away from a kid who doesn't have autism.
Yeah, I'm all right.
So you could be earning $300,000 a year, and you get this 30 grand.
So I'm not all right with
and you're
that.
earning $60,000. You're paying for it. The whole thing. $0. $0.
Well, that's why
we've got to go back to square one and get rid of it and start again.
That's why I'm saying to you,
quadriplegics definitely support.
Well,
cerebral palsy support.
But
MS support.
Why do you not make the same argument?
It shouldn't be the same thing.
If a quadriplegic is like the kid of a billionaire, you still want to give government
I think they should
money
still
to
get
them?
something.
So I think this is what's interesting about this debate is like it's not going to sound great, but like there's hypocrisy on every angle of this debate, and you're going to draw lines somewhere, right? And what I'm saying is, I think if you had to say where what are the problems with NDIS? Because all of our problems in Australia, dollar-wise, like a large proportion of them are being caused by the NDIS. That's absolutely correct what
and
you're saying.
And you guys like AUKUS, which is ridiculous. But yeah.
And so part of it is stretch diagnoses, predominantly in the ASD space, and part of it is straight rorting, where people don't even bother going to the doctor. They just get a pretend piece of paper and go and get NDIS money. And I think your overarching point is the strongest of all points, which is all of this pain and suffering we've spent 40 minutes talking about is how much a year extra?
6 billion.
6 billion. I think it might be, so these are my last two quick theses. It might be more in year one, because I think what's going to happen is recycling of assets. So if you've made a big gain on a stock today, you should sell that stock and buy it back at a higher cost base and get the 50% discount. And so the ATO will get a flood of capital gains taxes in the next 12 months, because people are just going to recycle assets on the same day, right? And then my other point that I would make
that is risky, because there's a high chance I think Libs come in and win, One Nation Libs come in and they reverse it. Yeah, well, maybe, but like when you say there's a high chance, I mean there was a predictable election result on the weekend in Farah.
What's it called? In
Queensland.
Albury-Wodonga. And like it was predictable, but it's bad news for the Libs, right? And
we say that because Labor didn't run. Like Jim Chalmers, the Treasurer, got on TV and was gloating like a Cheshire cat how good it is for Labor. Labor was too gutless to even run a candidate. So I think they would have been smashed just as bad.
Right, but it's not. But what we have to figure out what the right in this country is going to look like. I think they're still figuring it out, right?
Transparent.
But I think there will be a lot of recycling of assets. And this is my last point. If you're a founder today and your business is worth a decent chunk of money, then you should find someone to buy a big secondary round off you and sell a chunk of your shares to someone and lock in that capital gain, because if this is not reversed in the next 5 years, and if you're planning an exit in the next 5 years, your tax rate just doubled. And so if you've got a vertically integrated retail business, come talk to me. Because now is the time to sell down ahead of these changes. There's a 1 year window, right? There's a 1 year window. And so I think we're going to see a huge amount of selling activity by founders in the next 1 year.
For discounted prices. So you said
of course, because it's supply and demand.
Yeah, exactly.
Remember that thing? There's all this new supply that's going to come into the market. Like I think it's a good time for investors to buy assets.
When I'm talking about how the whole autism thing, I'm not criticising people with autism. Or
I know
autism.
that.
And everyone comment, the people who always have a go at me are people who are getting money from the government. So what's happened is these poor people who have, I'm not saying if you've got a kid with autism, you've been lucky. I'm saying it's a sad state of affairs or a tough state of affairs.
It's harder than someone that doesn't have
We've trained all these people, the government has trained all these people that any kind of thing that gets slightly wrong, government, taxpayers will give you money.
Yes.
And that is just ridiculous. This is a welfare state. This is a socialist communist state that we've trained Australians to be in. These are people who 10 years ago weren't getting money and we're going fine. So we've got to rethink how we consider entitlements, and at the very least means test the hell out of it. So if you're earning more than 100 grand, you don't get any. If you're earning 50 grand and you've got a son or daughter with severe learning disabilities or autism or what you want to call it, I've got much more sympathy for that. But certainly if you're earning 200, 300, 400K a year, doesn't mean you should be getting paid money from people who have nothing like that. It's just so unfair, this system that Labor and Liberal as well, to their discredit, has supported for 10 years.
So there has been, this culture has emerged in Western democracies, which you can only call a culture of entitlement.
Absolutely.
I just want to read you something as a last bit on this, because this was it was either the Australian or the Financial Review, where they were talking to Gen Z people, and they said there were 4 of them that they quoted, what's the thing that you most want from this budget? Okay, and I'll tell you what these 4 things were. Tabish said a more permanent reduction in university fees or more funding for universities generally. So what he is saying, or he or she is, or they is basically the future wealthy, i.e., people that go to university. We should give them a subsidy. So that's what they're saying.
Presumably he's about to go to university or
of course, or at university. Hussein, dental into Medicare like we already have for children. Expanding that to lower income could substantially improve healthcare. It's not a bad argument, but it's more entitlement. That's
someone's got to pay for it.
Give me money.
Yeah.
Will McCarthy, brave enough to use his surname in the article, increase funding to mental health services given the difficulty and expense associated with accessing psychologist appointments. More good points, but give us more money.
Yeah.
And Muthaya, expansion of youth allowance because of the meaningful impact it has on so many people's day-to-day lives, i.e. give me more money. So when they asked Gen Z, do you think there needs to be cuts in spending? It was pretty close to 50-50. So this is a generation, okay, they're young, right, and they haven't paid a lot of tax, but I feel like that generation is not attuned to the fact that we got to cut spending.
They've never lived through a recession. They've never seen what it can be like.
There's no way for this country to survive without spending cuts, because I think what's happened is you've got a government that is effectively pandering to this sense of entitlement that has occurred in Western democracies over the last 30 years, and at the same time really hates wealthy people. Really hates wealthy people.
Ultimately is helping them with the ridiculous change they made.
But is also incompetent. So you've got these kind of 2 threads with a heavy dose of incompetence. And so they're trying really hard to punch older wealthy people, but in fact have just beaten the hell out of young poor people.
It's like they've tried to punch someone.
So preposterous.
It's like Jim Chalmers has tried to punch this rich guy. The rich guy's ducked and has punched the poor 21-year-old behind him.
That is a perfect analogy. That is absolutely what's happened. And I think I would just encourage you, like I just want to end with what we started with. If you want to take benefits away from me that I think are unfair societally, then I don't like that. And I think I pay a lot of tax. But I can't really argue against it because it's fair. But these changes, no young person should be voting for these changes because they are voting against their own self-interest. They will not have the opportunity to accumulate wealth over the next 30 years that previous generations did.
Well, so on that note, we've got the budget tonight. We'll keep an eye on it. We'll obviously be back next week with our Ask Us Anything, and obviously we'll go through what's happened. And this has been some pretty distressing leaks we've seen from the federal government, and hopefully we've been wrong on some of the stuff, but it doesn't look great at this stage.
If this is what happens, we can say, I'm going to do an Adam Schwab. This is without doubt the worst budget, and there have been some bad budgets, the worst budget of the 21st century.
I'll probably go further. Probably worst budget since Whitlam.
Yeah,
You're going back that far, which was basically what was ruling the country.